Oprah Winfrey's legendary studio was buzzing with audience excitement when no one predicted they'd witness the biggest scandal in talk show history. As Caroline Levitt walked onto the stage, Oprah's first words were shocking. Stop. You're a mega robot. Real women speak here, not puppets. The studio atmosphere changed instantly. The warm yellow lighting that had welcomed millions of guests over 3 decades suddenly felt harsh and cold. The audience, a carefully curated mix of Oprah's most devoted fans, sat frozen in their plush red seats. They had arrived early that morning, some traveling from across the country, excited to witness another legendary Oprah interview. Instead, they were about to witness the destruction of a media empire. Caroline Levitt stood at the entrance to the stage, her burgundy dress impeccable, her blonde hair perfectly styled. At 27, she had already faced down the most hostile journalists in Washington. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The White House press secretary had accepted Oprah's invitation, thinking it would be an opportunity to reach across the political divide, to show that conservatives and liberals could still have meaningful dialogue. She had even watched old Oprah episodes to prepare, studying the host's interview style, her tendency to find common ground with even the most controversial guests. "Excuse me," Caroline said, her voice steady despite the shock coursing through her body. "Did you just call me a robot?" Oprah Winfrey rose from her iconic beige chair, the one that had seated presidents, movie stars, world leaders, and ordinary people with extraordinary stories. Her purple dress, designed specifically for this episode by her personal stylist, swished dramatically as she moved. At 71, Oprah still commanded attention with every gesture, every word carefully calculated for maximum impact. But today, something was different. The warmth that had made her America's therapist was gone, replaced by a cold fury that seemed to radiate from her very being. "You heard exactly what I said," Oprah declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built $1 billion empire on the power of her words. "I've had real women on this stage. Warriors who fought for justice, survivors who overcame impossible odds, truth tellers who changed the world. Maya Angelou sat in that chair and shared her soul. Michelle Obama opened her heart to millions. Hillary Clinton showed us what resilience means. You." She gestured dismissively at Caroline. "You're just Trump's pretty mouthpiece. A blonde Barbie doll programmed to spread lies and defend a man who represents everything wrong with America." The control room erupted in panic. Executive producer Sherry Salata, who had been with Oprah for 20 years, grabbed her headset. "What is she doing?" she hissed to the director. "This isn't the script. We rehearsed a completely different opening." "Should we cut to commercial?" the director asked, his hands hovering over the control board. "We can't. We're live on CBS and streaming on OWN. If we cut now, it'll be worse." In the audience, phones were already appearing despite the strict no recording policy. Sarah Mitchell, a 45-year-old teacher from Ohio who had been an Oprah fan since the 1990s, couldn't believe what she was witnessing. She had brought her teenage daughter to see what she thought would be an inspiring conversation. Instead, she was watching her idol attack a young woman who hadn't even sat down yet. Caroline took a measured step forward, her heels clicking on the polished stage floor. She had learned long ago that showing weakness in hostile situations only encouraged more attacks. "Ms. Winfrey, I accepted your invitation because I believed you wanted to have a meaningful conversation about bridging our nation's divides. If your intention was simply to ambush and insult me, don't you dare lecture me about intentions." Oprah interrupted, her voice rising to levels rarely heard on her stage. "You stand at that White House podium every day and lie to the American people. You defend a racist, sexist, xenophobic administration. You put a pretty face on ugly policies that hurt real people. And you have the audacity to come into my house, my sacred space, and pretend you're here for dialogue." The audience was spellbound. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, not wanting to miss a moment of this unprecedented confrontation. In the third row, Marcus Thompson, a 38-year-old financial advisor and longtime Republican, felt his respect for Oprah crumbling with each word. He had come with his wife, a Democrat, thinking this interview might help them understand each other's political views better. Instead, he was watching the supposed queen of empathy reveal herself as someone filled with hatred for people like him. "Ms. Winfrey," Caroline said, her composure remarkable under the circumstances, "I've admired you since I was a little girl. You taught me that strong women lift each other up. You showed me that listening to different perspectives makes us wiser. You built an empire on bringing people together. What happened to that woman? Oprah's face contorted with rage. That woman was naive. That woman didn't realize that some people, some ideologies are beyond redemption. That woman didn't understand that platforming fascists and their enablers is dangerous. Well, I'm not that woman anymore. Security. She snapped her fingers. Remove Ms. Levitt from my studio. She's not welcome in this house of truth and healing. Two security guards, Marcus Johnson and David Chen, exchanged uncertain glances. They had worked for Harpo Productions for over a decade and had never been asked to remove a guest who hadn't violated any rules. Marcus, the head of security, hesitated. He had escorted out drunk audience members, stalkers who had tried to rush the stage, and even a few guests who had become violent, but removing an invited guest who was simply standing there calmly. This was unprecedented. Now, Oprah commanded, her voice echoing through the studio. I said remove her now. Caroline raised her hand, a gesture so calm and controlled that it stopped everyone in their tracks. That won't be necessary. I'll leave voluntarily. But first, I'd like to address your audience, many of whom are conservative women who have watched you faithfully for decades. They deserve to know why you're throwing me out before the interview even began. You don't get to address anyone. Yes, I do, Caroline interrupted, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. You invited me here. You promoted this interview for weeks. These people took time off work, arranged childcare, traveled here to see what you promised would be a groundbreaking conversation between two strong women from different worlds. They deserve to know why you're breaking that promise. The audience murmured their agreement. Several people nodded, including some who clearly disagreed with Caroline's politics, but felt she deserved basic courtesy. Oprah's carefully maintained composure finally shattered completely. You want to know why? Fine. Because you represent everything that's wrong with women in politics today. You use your blonde hair and your pretty smile to sell poison to the American people. You stand there with your little cross necklace, pretending to be righteous while you defend a man who brags about grabbing women, who puts children in cages, who was elected by millions of Americans, Caroline interjected calmly, including many women, including, I'd bet, many of your viewers. Are they all robots too, Ms. Winfrey? Are they all puppets? The ones who support him? Yes, Oprah shouted, completely abandoning the measured tones that had made her a broadcasting legend. They're brainwashed, manipulated, stupid puppets who vote against their own interests because they can't see past their racism and ignorance. A collective gasp went through the audience. Oprah had just insulted not only Caroline, but potentially millions of her own viewers. In the control room, phones were ringing off the hook. CBS executives were demanding to know what was happening. Advertisers were already expressing concern. The social media manager watched in horror as negative comments flooded in by the thousands. Caroline shook her head slowly, sadly. The Oprah Winfrey I grew up watching would never say that. She believed in the wisdom of everyday people. She gave voice to the voiceless. She saw the good in everyone, even those who disagreed with her. That Oprah would be ashamed of what you just said. Get out! Oprah screamed, all pretense of dignity abandoned. GTUOFMA studio re GHT no I'm going, Caroline said, turning to face the audience one last time. But I want you all to know that I'm sorry. You came here expecting the Oprah who builds bridges, and instead you got someone who burns them. You deserved better. America deserved better. As Caroline began walking toward the exit, something extraordinary happened. In the fifth row, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Williams stood up and began clapping. Patricia was a registered Democrat who had voted for Biden, but she was appalled by what she had just witnessed. This wasn't the political discourse she believed in. This was just cruelty. Another audience member joined her, then another. Within seconds, approximately a third of the audience was on their feet, applauding Caroline as she made her dignified exit. They weren't necessarily endorsing her politics, many of them disagreed with Trump's policies, but they were acknowledging her grace under fire and expressing their disapproval of Oprah's behavior. St. Oprah bellowed, her face contorted with rage. If you support her, if you stand with that mega robot, then you can leave too? This is my studio, and I won't have Trump supporters contaminating it. The standing audience members looked at each other in shock. Several of them weren't even Trump supporters, they were simply appalled by Oprah's behavior. But faced with this ultimatum, many decided to leave. They filed out quietly, with dignity, while Oprah continued to rant. "Go, all of you, get out! I don't need fascist sympathizers in my audience." By the time the exodus ended, nearly half the studio seats were empty. The remaining audience members sat in stunned silence, many of them recording the meltdown on their phones, despite the supposed ban on recording devices. The carefully controlled environment of the Oprah Winfrey Show had descended into chaos. Outside the studio, Caroline was met by a growing crowd of supporters who had heard about the incident on social media. News travels fast in the digital age, and within minutes of the confrontation beginning, clips had been posted online. People had rushed to the Harpo Studios building in Chicago, wanting to show their support. "Ms. Levitt, are you okay?" a young woman asked, pushing through the crowd. Caroline, ever composed, smiled warmly. "I'm fine, thank you." Disappointed, but fine. A reporter from a local Chicago station thrust a microphone in her face. "Can you tell us what happened in there?" Caroline considered for a moment, then spoke. "I was invited to have a conversation about bridging political divides. Instead, I was called a robot, a puppet, and a Barbie doll before I could even sit down." Miss Winfrey made it clear that she doesn't believe conservatives deserve a platform or even basic respect. "That's not dialogue, that's dehumanization. Will you be taking any legal action?" "No," Caroline said firmly. "I don't believe in cancel culture from the left or the right. Miss Winfrey has the right to her opinions, no matter how intolerant they may be. I just hope her viewers realize that the woman who taught them to be their best selves apparently doesn't believe that applies to people who vote differently than she does." Back in the studio, Oprah was attempting to salvage the show. With half the audience gone and the energy completely destroyed, she brought out her scheduled second guest, Academy Award winner Viola Davis. But the atmosphere was toxic. Viola, clearly uncomfortable with what she had witnessed, gave stilted answers and kept glancing toward the exits. "Viola, tell us about your new film," Oprah said, trying to recapture her famous interviewing style. It's a story about bringing people together despite their differences," Viola said carefully, the irony not lost on anyone. The interview limped along for another 20 minutes before mercifully ending. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Viola hurried off stage without the usual post-show pleasantries. She would later tell friends that it was the most uncomfortable experience of her career. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within an hour, Fire Oprah Meltdown was trending worldwide. The clips were everywhere, Oprah calling Caroline a "amazing robot," screaming at audience members to leave, declaring that Trump voters were brainwashed and stupid. Even liberal commentators who despised Trump couldn't defend Oprah's behavior. On CNN, Anderson Cooper, no fan of the Trump administration, said, "What we saw today was not journalism or even advocacy. It was a personal attack that violated every principle of civil discourse." Over at MSNBC, even Rachel Maddow had to admit, "While I understand Oprah's frustration with the current administration, attacking a guest before they even sit down is not acceptable." Caroline Levitt showed remarkable composure in a situation where she was essentially ambushed. Fox News, predictably, had wall-to-wall coverage. Tucker Carlson devoted his entire hour to the incident. "The mask finally came off," he declared. Oprah Winfrey, who made billions pretending to care about all Americans, revealed that she actually despises half the country. But the most damaging responses came from Oprah's own fans. Her social media pages, usually filled with inspirational quotes and praise, were flooded with messages of disappointment and anger. "I've watched Oprah every day for 25 years. I'm a conservative woman. According to her, I'm stupid and brainwashed. I'm heartbroken. Oprah taught me to respect everyone's journey. Today she showed that only applies if your journey aligns with her politics." Unsubscribing from OWN. "My grandmother loved Oprah. She was also a Trump voter. Hearing Oprah call people like my grandma stupid puppets makes me sick. This isn't the woman who inspired us." Within 48 hours, the viewership numbers came in, and they were catastrophic. The episode had started with typical ratings, about 2.5 million viewers. But after Caroline left and the audience exodus occurred, viewership had plummeted to just 800,000. It was the lowest rated episode in the show's 30-year history. More troubling for Oprah's business empire were the subscription cancellations. OWN's Oprah Winfrey Network lost 150,000 subscribers in 48 hours. Weight Watchers, which Oprah partly owned and served as spokesperson for, saw its stock price drop 15% as conservative customers announced boycotts. Her book club, once capable of turning any selection into a bestseller, saw its latest pick struggle to crack the top 100 on Amazon. Oprah attempted damage control the next day with a statement released through Harpo Productions. Yesterday's show did not reflect the values of inclusivity and respect that have defined my career. While I stand by my concerns about the current administration's policies, I regret that my passion prevented a productive dialogue. The statement, notable for what it didn't say, there was no apology to Caroline or to the viewers Oprah had insulted, only made things worse. Fire Oprah apologized began trending, with even some liberals calling for her to take real responsibility. Gayle King, Oprah's best friend and CBS This Morning host, tried to defend her. People don't understand the pressure Oprah has been under. She's watching the country she loves being torn apart. Sometimes that emotion overwhelms us. Her co-host Norah O'Donnell pushed back. But Gayle, she called an invited guest a robot before she even sat down. She told audience members to leave for applauding. That's not emotion, that's intolerance. The financial bleeding continued. Major advertisers began pulling out of Oprah's show and network. Procter & Gamble, which had been with Oprah since the beginning, announced they were recessing their relationship. Microsoft ended their partnership with OWN for educational content. Even some liberal-leaning companies distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with such blatant intolerance. Weight Watchers held an emergency board meeting. Oprah's behavior had become a liability for the brand that preached acceptance and self-love. How could they have a spokesperson who had just demonstrated such hatred for millions of potential customers? Caroline, meanwhile, was handling her newfound fame with characteristic grace. At her next White House press briefing, she was asked about the incident repeatedly. Caroline, do you think Oprah should apologize? That's for Ms. Winfrey to decide. I've moved on and am focused on serving the American people. Are you surprised by her reaction? I'm disappointed. I grew up watching Oprah teach acceptance and understanding. To see her abandon those principles because of political differences is sad, but it's also a reminder that we all need to guard against letting hatred consume us. Do you think her show will survive this? Caroline smiled slightly. That's for viewers to decide. But I will say this, when you build your brand on bringing people together, you can't suddenly decide half of them are unwelcome. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. A week after the incident, CBS announced that the Oprah Winfrey Show would be taking a hiatus to retool and refocus on its core mission. Industry insiders knew what this meant. The show was effectively canceled. After 30 years of dominating daytime television, Oprah's show was ending not with a celebration but with a disgrace. The ripple effects continued. Harpo Productions laid off 200 employees as production deals dried up. OWN's prime time lineup saw ratings crater as viewers abandoned the network en masse. Oprah's magazine O saw subscriptions plummet. The carefully constructed media empire was crumbling, all because of a few minutes of uncontrolled hatred. Tyler Perry, one of Oprah's closest friends and a major content creator for OWN, privately urged her to make amends. You need to do what you've always done, own your mistake and grow from it, he reportedly told her. Reach out to Caroline. Apologize sincerely. Show the world the Oprah they fell in love with. But Oprah's pride wouldn't allow it. Surrounded by yes men who told her she had been brave to stand up to the MAGA threat, she retreated to her Montecito estate, convinced she was the victim. She gave a few interviews to sympathetic journalists, claiming she was being canceled for speaking truth to power. These interviews only made things worse. When Stephen Colbert gently suggested that calling guests robots before they speak might have been excessive, Oprah doubled down. I won't apologize for refusing to platform fascism, she declared, seemingly oblivious to the irony of silencing someone while claiming to fight fascism. Caroline Levitt, by contrast, was thriving. Her social media following had exploded from 500,000 to over 5 million. Book publishers were offering 7-figure advances for her autobiography. Speaking bureaus reported unprecedented demand for her appearances. But she remained focused on her job, conducting daily press briefings with the same professionalism that had impressed even her critics. Young women, in particular, were inspired by how she had handled the ambush. Conservative women felt validated, while even liberal women admitted she had shown remarkable poise. "I don't agree with her politics." One viral tweet read, "But Caroline Levitt showed more class in 5 minutes than Oprah did in the entire episode." 3 months after the incident, Oprah's empire was in ruins. OWN announced it would cease original programming and become a rerun channel. Weight Watchers had ended their relationship with Oprah, causing her to lose hundreds of millions in stock value. Her production company canceled multiple projects in development. A former Harpo employee, speaking anonymously to The Hollywood Reporter, revealed the toxic atmosphere inside Oprah's companies. She surrounded herself with people who never challenged her. They convinced her that attacking Caroline was striking a blow against Trump. Nobody had the courage to tell her she was destroying her own legacy. The business schools that had once taught Oprah as a case study in brand building now taught her as a cautionary tale in brand destruction. Harvard Business School professor Linda Hill wrote, "Oprah Winfrey spent 30 years building trust with audiences across the political spectrum. She destroyed it in 30 minutes by revealing that her message of acceptance had partisan limits." 6 months later, Oprah attempted a comeback with a podcast, but it failed to gain traction. The woman who had once commanded the attention of millions couldn't even break into the top 100 podcasts. Her time had passed, ended by her own intolerance. In her final public appearance at a charity gala for education, Oprah seemed diminished. The confident media mogul who had interviewed presidents and shaped culture was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood what she had lost. When a brave reporter asked about Caroline Levitt, Oprah's response was telling, "I let my emotions override my values. That's something I'll have to live with." Caroline, told about Oprah's comment, was gracious as always. "We all have moments we regret. What matters is learning from them and moving forward. I hope Ms. Winfrey finds peace." A year after the incident, Caroline left the White House to write her book and start a media company focused on bridging political divides. Ironically, exactly what Oprah's show had claimed to do. Her book, Grace Under Fire: Finding Common Ground in Divided Times, became an instant bestseller. In the book's acknowledgments, Caroline wrote something that brought tears to many readers' eyes. "To Oprah Winfrey, who taught a little girl in New Hampshire that she could achieve anything, and who inadvertently taught a young woman in Washington that principles matter more than popularity. I learned from both versions of you." The Oprah Caroline incident became a watershed moment in American media. It marked the end of the era when media personalities could attack those they disagreed with without consequence. It showed that audiences valued respect over ideology, that they wanted dialogue, not demagoguery. Political scientists studied it as an example of how institutional power could crumble when wielded irresponsibly. Sociologists examined it as a case study in how political polarization could corrupt even those who preached unity. Media critics saw it as the moment when old media finally had to reckon with its biases. For Caroline Levitt, it was the moment she transcended her role as press secretary to become a cultural figure. She had walked into Oprah's studio expecting a conversation and walked out as a symbol of grace under fire, of dignity in the face of hatred. For Oprah Winfrey, it was the end of an era. The woman who had taught millions to live their best lives had forgotten how to live hers. The empire built on empathy had crumbled because empathy, it turned out, had political conditions. The empty studio in Chicago stood as a monument to what happens when hatred overcomes wisdom, when political tribalism trumps human decency. The chairs that had hosted thousands of conversations now gathered dust, silent testimony to how quickly an empire can fall when its empress forgets her own lessons. In the end, the woman Oprah had dismissed as a ego robot had proven to be deeply human, capable of grace, forgiveness, and growth. While Oprah, who had positioned herself as the arbiter of authentic living, had revealed herself to be trapped by her own prejudices, unable to see past political labels to the person beneath. The puppet, as it turned out, wasn't Caroline Levitt. It was Oprah herself, controlled by her hatred, manipulated by her biases, ultimately destroyed by her inability to practice what she had preached for 3 decades. As media historians would later write, the Oprah Caroline incident wasn't just about 2 women from different political worlds. It was about what happens when we let politics poison our humanity. Oprah Winfrey forgot that every person who sat in her guest chair was a human being deserving of basic respect. In denying Caroline Levitt that respect, she lost the respect of millions. In trying to destroy a young woman she saw as a threat, she only destroyed herself. The story served as a warning and a lesson in a democracy. Dialogue matters. Respect matters. And when we abandon both for the satisfying rush of political hatred, we don't just lose an argument, we lose ourselves.